What's going on? It's Funkify here on behalf of MMOBomb.com, and welcome back to the Free to Play Podcast, episode 109. Today is June 20th, 2014, and
Or
well,
July.
What?
Or July.
Oh yeah, it is July. Holy crap. I just completely skipped over a month. I'm sorry, July. It's July. How's it going, guys? We got Xanax and Jason here. How you guys doing today?
Good. Wog.
Good.
Wog.
Wog. We got some Wog news to talk about, specifically dealing with Warhammer 40k. Wog. Are we just going to say Wog through the entire episode? Is that what's going to happen?
It's,
Hey,
the
Jason.
new, it's the new Hodor.
Oh, Hodor. Wog.
Or Wog.
I guess Wog would be older than Hodor, though,
True.
technically. Jason,
Yeah.
how's your weekend been? You've been doing a lot of wogging?
No, mostly just sitting around. I usually go for a walk every day, but...
Oh,
that's-
okay.
you know.
Xanax? Did you wog last night?
No.
It does sound like a rather personal question, I have to say.
Yes, that is a very good question.
He's like, I wog by myself.
Oh, that's sad.
No, I do not do any wogging. In fact, I just found out some interesting wog news. So
Oh, really? Well, we're going to discuss that WOG news. Hopefully it's appropriate for the stream. I'm assuming so. But yeah, we've got a great episode, guys. Talking a little bit about Eternal Crusade, which is the Warhammer 40k MMORPG that's coming up and coming, going to come out in 2015 from Behavior Interactive. We also got a little bit of news regarding a gigantic MOBA. It's giant. Called
Huge.
Gigantic. I guess you can't call it Gigantic when its name is Gigantic. You have to use another descriptor for that. Talking
Huge.
about MOBA Gigantic. Yeah. Nothing?
No.
No.
Move on.
wog.
Okay.
Wog.
Wog.
Hodor.
Alright, and then of course we got some other news along with your regular member highlights and question of the week responses. So why don't we wog right into this and get into the news? Oh my gosh, it's going to be a thing this
It's
whole
going to be
episode.
the whole thing, yeah.
I already know. Okay, let's get into the news then. So, guys, if we haven't spoiled the fun already, talking a little bit about Eternal Crusade today. For those of you, we've never talked about this game on the podcast, or I think really on the site up until a couple days ago, when Jason, you actually sat down with Behavior Interactive and sort of interviewed them a bit concerning their up-and-coming MMORPG Eternal Crusade, which is based on Warhammer 40k. It's based on the space version of Warhammer. That's what the 40k is. Although, does anyone actually know what 40k is supposed to mean? Like,
It's
I never
the year.
actually...
It's like the year. It's like the year 40,000, the 41st millennium, basically.
What?
I never
That's when
knew
it takes
that.
place, yeah.
Okay, I just thought they added a bunch of numbers at the end to make it seem spacey.
Well, you can do that too, but it actually does mean that.
Okay. Well, Warhammer 40k Eternal Crusade, it's an action MMO. It's third person. Kind of has some elements of PlanetSide in it where, it's a bunch of factions competing over a land and fighting against each other in third person action combat. Kind of is not a typical MMO with, skill bars and such. It's a lot about aiming, about using weaponry and the abilities built into the suits, depending on what faction you're playing. And Jason, you kind of sat down with Behavior and talked to them specifically about the free-to-play portion of the game, because this game is not completely free-to-play. It is sort of a buy-to-play game. Well, it is a buy-to-play game, but it's got a free-to-play option. Can you, Jason, just explain a little bit first initially what that option is and how that works?
Sure, like you say, it's normally buy to play. You'll buy a box and you can play forever. So like Guild Wars 2, that sort of thing. But they are going to make a sort of like a free trial, free demo version of it available, where you can get in, you don't have to pay, and you can play as an orc. That's one of the 4 factions. You're going to be kind of limited as to how far you can progress, basically. You can use microtransactions to buy through that progress to get past all that. But as I said with them, at some point, you might as well just buy the box, buy the game, so you can get full access to that and to all the other stuff in the game. I think it's going to be kind of interesting, though, how they try to balance that out in terms of factional balance. That was one of the main things I talked to them about, because if you have, in theory, 1/4, there are 4 factions. If you have, in theory, 25% of people playing each faction who pay for it, and then a bunch more people coming in free who are only going to be able to play as one faction, how's that going to work out? Is that going to be imbalancing? They don't seem to think it's going to be as big of a problem. I'm still a little skeptical about it, though.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't understand Warhammer 40k lore, there's Space Marines, there's Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, and Eldar. Those are sort of the main four factions that you'll be able to play in Warhammer 40k. There's also the Tyranids, which are sort of like a PvE faction. They're NPCs that are basically this mutant alien life force that you'll have to contend with. But as players, you'll play as one of the initial four. And as a free-to-play player, you get access to specifically the Orcs. Those are the factions that only free-to-play players get access to. And if you're familiar with 40k lore, you'll know that Orcs are generally a lot less powerful than, say, a Space Marine or a Chaos Space Marine or even Eldar. But they make up for that with their numbers. So the idea that this faction is completely free-to-play, meaning that it's no entry bar, everybody can just play it, it sort of plays into that whole having a huge green army force, essentially. And having this like unstoppable, I don't know, wave or whatever we would call it, just this huge river of green, essentially, attacking everything else. And it's kind of a neat principle. It sort of makes sense that would be the free-to-play race that players would play as. But as you said, Jason, how does that really work out towards balance? And do you think that, okay, I'm a free-to-play player, I play as an orc, I don't mind playing as an orc, I like orcs, but do you think that, like, you would feel like if you're not playing with other people, you would just get decimated? Because I'm assuming an orc versus a space marine, the space marine is going to win every time unless there's, like, a bunch of orcs to fight the space marines at once.
Well, you see, that's the thing that worries me, because I played Lord of the Rings Online, and the PvP in there is two factions, free peoples and monster players. To be in there as a free player when the game came out, you had to be at least level 40, and the max level was 50. So you could be pretty well competent, but you had to play for a while, obviously, to get a character up to that level. To play as a monster player, you only need to be level 10, and then you could just access a level 50 monster player. Monsters were unquestionably weaker than free players, than the Freeps. Freeps and Creeps is what their standard nomenclature was. Mm-hmm. Creeps were definitely less strong. And the reasoning behind that was, again, like you said, because they're supposed to be this horde of wargs and orcs and whatever. So it's supposed to be that a good man of Gondor can stand up against a bunch of these kind of guys. Now, early on, that kind of made sense because there were going to be a lot more creeps because it was a lot easier to get one. But as the game went on a little while, of course, everybody had a level 50 character, so they could all go out there as freeps, and it became really unpleasant because, like I said, when the numbers were equal, which they were after not too long, the freeps would always beat the creeps. So that's what I worry about is going to happen here. Is that sure it might seem that way at first, but eventually, if factions don't even out, you're going to have the orc players thinking, we don't have as many hit points or as strong or whatever as the other guys. So they're going to feel like they're at a disadvantage every time they go into a fight, unless they bring those great numbers. But even then, you've got the feeling of, we can't win a fair fight, which kind of sucks when you're trying to play a game.
Yeah, I mean, from a lore perspective, it totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. But from gameplay and lore don't always translate into an equal experience. Yeah. And I am worried that, like you said, Jason, that as an orc player, it's going to be awesome when I can have like hundreds of my other fellow orcs and we're just storming, and you got one space marine taking out swaths of orcs, but it's okay because we got buddies and, it's all about that, sure, getting over, sort of just swarming over them essentially. But what happens when people decide that they want to play Space Marines? Because that's a really popular, it's Space Marines. Pretty much every Warhammer 40k game ever has been done from the perspective of a Space Marine. Ultramarines, Dark Wolves, all these other chapters of Marines. And so players are naturally going to gravitate towards that. And as a free-to-play player, you can purchase through microtransactions these other factions. I believe that's how they are.
I don't know if that was the case. I think you still. I know you could upgrade your orc with microtransactions, but I don't think you could. I don't know if you could necessarily buy the other factions.
You can't outright buy the other factions, maybe.
Yeah, at that point, at least at that point, you might as well buy the game.
Sure.
Buy the full game and get access to everything.
Okay, well, I do know that you can buy access to some of like the more advanced classes.
Yeah, more advanced orc classes, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like base classes that each faction has. And as a free-to-play player, you have access to the base classes, I believe. And then if you wanted to get access to a more advanced class, like the what did they call it? There it was like the Mecha Orc or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was the what were the Mecha Noobs? He said in order for you to get access to the Mega Noobs, you would have to purchase that premium class, and they sort of justify that by saying that if you're a premium player, you also have to purchase those premium classes with in-game currency before you're able to unleash it onto the battlefield. So it kind of seems a little bit like the max class from PlanetSide, where you use in-game currency and you unlock it for a certain amount of time. It's stronger than everything else, but when you die, other people get more experience and credit for killing you. And so that makes a little bit of sense. But not allowing them to, move over to Chaos Space Marines or Eldar or Space Marines from free-to-play unless they purchase the box almost seems like it's a way for them to keep free-to-play players in the orcs. It keeps them from just splintering off into Space Marines or the other factions, because if you can't buy access to those and you have to actually buy the full box copy, that may be too much for some people to spend at one time, or they may feel like it's not justified to spend at one time. So I don't know. What do you think, Xanax? You like the idea of being like one of a million orcs that go out and sort of work as a big team, or do you like being sort of like the individual strong Space Marine where you can just cut through 40 orcs at a time?
I mean, it all depends on if the game even gets a million free-to-play players to begin with. I have a question. With the orcs, are there going to be like sort of NPC orcs that kind of fill these battlefields along with the player orcs, or will the sort of opposing orc enemies be purely players?
I don't think so. I mean, there might be some NPCs guarding your base or something like that. Like if that's about the most that might be there, or it might just be straight up like PlanetSide 2, where it's just nothing but players. I don't really know.
It does sound like the Tyranids will be the primary PvE faction. So
but they'll want to kill everybody. So.
Yeah, they want to kill everybody.
Okay. See, and I think that's where the issue lies with the game. They're basically building this game based on like an age system. And so the older this game gets, the more unbalanced the game is going to get, because let's face it, unless there's only been a few MMOs in the history of MMOs that have only gotten more and more and more popular as they've gone on. But typically, MMOs usually get less popular, and at a certain point, they start to like die off or they decrease in age. And if you're really going to be saying like this one faction is basically based on the population, and it has to have a whole overwhelming amount of population versus the other factions to be any useful, then that's a very, very bad design, in my opinion.
Now, Behavior did talk to Jason and mention Jason. I remember they said something about like giving bonuses to certain factions based on population. So like the larger factions would have like bigger challenges, and like the smaller factions would have like these small bonuses that they would get, I guess, to make them more competitive. Can you elaborate on that, Jason? Did they sort of talk about that a little bit more and sort of explain how that system would work?
No, it's pretty much all that's in the article. But I mean, you go off, like you said, like other games, like well, actually, PlanetSide doesn't have this, but some other PvP games you might have. Xanax is familiar with Guild Wars 2. Yeah, when you're outnumbered in your faction, when you're outnumbered in the World versus World, you get bonuses to your XP and whatever. So you will gain a little more to help make up for the fact that you might not have as many people there. So that's what I would think is what that amounts to.
Yeah.
Well, even if it does come down to that, then why not just make the orcs strong to begin with? Because let's face it, like I don't see the free-to-play players staying around forever and being free-to-play players.
Well, on the one hand, that's kind of what they want. I mean, they don't want you to do that. But again, like I said, for at least in the short term, it'll kind of, I think it might be a negative for the paid players if they're just going to be over. If either as a paid orc player, it's going to suck for you because your guys are underpowered because you're going to have all these other guys around, or it's going to suck for the other factions because they're going to get the feeling that they can't. The orcs can only win in an unfair fight. That was the sort of thing that we saw a lot. I saw a lot on the forums in Lotro. Was all the free.
Berserkin.
Yeah, you guys can't win unless you Zerg. That's what we saw a lot of. So I mean, it's yeah. I don't know that it's a great decision.
I mean, but
Well,
orcs. If you look at 40k lore again, orcs are that's their mentality.
the Zerg,
It's
yeah.
a Zerg. Like
Sure.
that's their mentality, is to overwhelm the enemy. And as a, like you mentioned, Jason, as a paying orc player, if you actually wanted to play orcs but you bought the game, there are different classes that are more, I'd say, tanky or more appropriate to go one-on-one with any of the other factions. Like, you know, if you actually look at some of the characters and some of the types of units that the orcs have access to, some of the larger, like the orc mech guys, like the war bosses, essentially. Those are really big orcs, you know, and those are typically
Yeah.
orcs that can go toe to toe with a space marine. So if you imagine you have the paying players who are orc players intertwined with a sort of less strong free-to-play players, then you might have a more sort of cohesive battle group. So you have the guys that are a little bit like cannon fodder, but still effective in groups, and then you have the bigger sort of paying players who back them up with
Well,
these sort of larger classes.
it's funny that you're saying that because that sounds cool and all, but it also sounds to me that's pay to win. And now that's another concern if that's really how it's going to be, because why should I be paying for a more advanced class in my org and then get more power? I mean, it's just a very tricky design. I think it's a very bad design because I don't see how Behavior can make this design and think it's a permanent solution or a solution that's going to work over a long period of time. I see this changing within 6 months to a year of the game just being released.
I think they could simplify things a lot more and save themselves a lot of headaches. Is basically what it comes down.
I mean,
to.
Yeah.
it's still early on in development. There's been a couple of live streams where we've seen basic gameplay.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's been primarily just focused on the Space Marine side of things.
Yeah.
So Space Marine versus, I think, Chaos Marine is what they've shown in terms of gameplay. And from a perspective that it's still really rough and really early, we haven't seen anything orc related. So we don't really know how orcs will even match up because we haven't seen what a base orc can do. So there's a lot of just like unknown and hesitation, I'd have to say, just based on, you know, we've seen in the past what free-to-play unbalance can do, essentially. And basing something around that, certainly, it's kind of like they feel as though even if there wasn't free-to-play players, there would be, you know, enough players through the buy-to-play aspect, but because they want the orcs to feel like this really huge number, that they're adding the option for free-to-play so that faction, you know, gets bolstered, essentially, to a point where it makes lore sense.
It's weird though, and I'm glad that you brought up lore because that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, why would you try to sort of like fill in the lore with more player controlled aspects? Like, I don't get that. I feel like if you really want to have something stick true to its lore, then make it PvE, make it NPC based, not player based, not playable characters, because then it's like it's gonna mess with the lore. Like, people who are fans, I'm sure there are a ton of people who are fans of lore and maybe fans of orcs that aren't gonna like the fact that at the end of the day, the orcs of this MMO are not the same sort of orcs of the classic Warhammer 40k.
Yeah, and Behavior did say specifically that they wanted the orcs to feel like orcs. You know, they wanted them to feel like they were from 40k. They didn't want them to be balanced, almost, you know, like carbon copies of Space Marines or the other factions. They you know, just their own orc flair. They wanted them to feel specific, like this Green Menace, this Green Tide, essentially. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I've never known an MMO, a PvP MMO like this, to balance initially around faction size, essentially.
Popularity.
Yeah.
It's
You
weird.
know what they could do? One really quick idea I just had, if they wanted to, make it more balanced overall, is have the orc players be like the pet class, so that an orc can't fight a Space Marine, but an orc is going to have 3 or 4 minions surrounding him, so then it'll feel like the Horde, even though you have the same number of players.
Yeah, I think it would be awesome if you had like an orc boss basically, and you had like 3 or 4 like orc NPCs that just followed you around. Yeah.
Exactly.
Kind of like Kingdom on the Fire.
Yeah, slightly like that. I
Yeah.
guess.
I mean that would actually make a lot of sense. That's a great idea.
It is.
I hope they
I
do
don't know
that.
if that will actually.
Yeah, I hope they do that. See, that sounds a lot better now.
You know what? One thing I'm worried about though, if orcs are supposed to be like this huge number, like a lot of them on screen at once. Have you ever played PlanetSide 2 when there's a lot of people on screen at once?
Oh Lord.
Like, imagine.
Optimization is way down the road for them.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know that. But I can only imagine, like, okay, if you're a free-to-play player, chances are maybe you don't have the greatest PC. So you're playing also the faction with the most units on screen at once. Like there's some things that they're definitely going to have to tackle when they come along. And I don't know. What do you, Xanax? Would you try it? Are you interested?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not shy about spending money on video games. I'm not one of those that are like free to play power. No, I'll if I have a hint of interest, then I'll buy it. So I'll probably dip my toe into the orc field first, and then buy the game. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna play it though.
I really think that Space Marines are going to be like huge. Like I almost feel like initially there's going to be just as many Space Marines as there's going to be orcs until the game sort of gets traction with the free play community, and that worries me, you know, because Space Marines just almost innately have access to jetpacks, it seems. Although, okay, there are specific Space Marines who have jetpacks. I should say that there are specific classes of them. So, and there's also specific classes of orcs that have jetpacks too. So, I mean, that's balanced in that respect. But I don't know. A part of me is like giggly because I played like Warhammer 40k Space Marine, and you got to play as a Space Marine and slaughter thousands of orcs, and then the multiplayer of that was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was just like Space Marine versus Chaos Marine. I don't think there was any orcs, but I'm kind of curious to see that system sort of implemented into a full-fledged MMO. There is some talk about the RPG aspects, so I think from a progression standpoint, they made it so it's horizontal progression, not vertical. So it's kind of like PlanetSide 2, where level 1 or level 2 player can contend with all the other players. Bullets still hurt.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So they're gonna make it like that, I believe. So there's definitely a lot of promise here. There's a lot of like good groundwork for them to work with. But like I think we all agreed upon, it's really going to depend on how many free-to-play players are playing orcs initially, how long they play orcs continually, and really orc to Space Marine, how much of a gap there is in between the two, in terms of power.
Yeah.
Those would be pretty big factors. They did say that they want to add more factions later on, though, because the Warhammer 40k universe does have other factions. These are just the most iconic ones. So eventually there'll be more, and with more factions becomes more splintering and more balance questions. So we'll see how they handle the first 4, and then I guess we'll go from there.
Oh, and another concern, it might be the servers. I hope they go with a mega server rather than like...
Individual servers?
Yeah, because if you're already splintering a community between factions, the last thing you want to do is splinter them between individual servers that can't cross over.
Well, it is one world.
Yeah.
So unlike, say, PlanetSide 2, which has like a bunch of different continents, it does seem like there's just one giant continent. From what it seems like, they talk about the battlefield as one territory or one world to conquer, essentially. So I don't know if it's going to be split up like PlanetSide, or if it's just going to be in one centralized area. But yeah, I do agree that making it so that everybody's in at least one server would definitely be like ideal. Even PlanetSide 2 has condensed its servers down to just I think a couple now.
Yeah.
Post-launch.
It used to be like 3 or 4, and now it's like
one or two.
one or
But
two.
to be honest, I played PlanetSide 2 last night, and it was great.
Yeah,
Like,
it's amazing.
There's tons of players.
Yeah, a lot. I'm on the Emerald server, and I was gonna make a comment. I was like, when you're talking about horizontal progression, there's almost nowhere ceiling than being like a level 25 or rank 25, and then seeing like a level 4 like just snipe you.
Yeah.
Like it's the most degrading feeling ever. But
You
it's
feel
so
pretty bad about it.
yeah.
Like,
But on the flip end, you're level 4, you kill level 99, you're like, oh my gosh, I just did that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think we'll just have to see how like the initial factions for orcs actually play. If they're fun, if the base classes are fun, then maybe people won't feel compelled so much to play the more premium ones, or at least wait a while before playing the premium ones. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I'm interested. Early access is said to begin soon. They want to get it out as soon as possible, with full release coming in 2015. So we still got some time. Still got at least a year.
Jason, did you scoff?
Yeah, no. It's just saying, yeah.
He was just, early access, Jason. We know how much you like early
Oh yeah,
access.
I love early access. Yeah.
It's the best. Oh, there are vehicles. There will be vehicles in Warhammer 40k Eternal Crusade. They should have just called it PlanetSide, the Warhammer 40k experience. like it's just a skin for PlanetSide with Warhammer 40k.
I think people are going to argue that PlanetSide ripped off Warhammer, but
I don't know. PlanetSide's been around for a while, but Warhammer's been around since like the 80s. So yeah, they're both futuristic, but in their own way. I don't see any like space alien Tyranids romping around and PlanetSide killing people yet.
well, what
what's
about
that
the
in there?
VS?
What'd you say?
The VS, the Venu.
They're not quite space aliens. They're like people who got this space alien technology and they worship it. But Tyranids are straight up space aliens.
Yeah.
They're just space aliens. All right.
Oh, maybe Halo. Anyway, move on.
Yeah, let's go ahead and then move on to our second article here. Talking a little bit about the reactions to the newly announced MOBA Gigantic. I know how much we're MOBA fans here.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we're great fans of the MOBA. Gigantic was developed from some of the former developers behind StarCraft 2, Guild Wars 2, and State of Decay. The primary developer, James Finney, he was the lead designer for Guild Wars, and then I believe, game design lead for Guild Wars 2 up until 2009. So he didn't see the game throughout launch. He did splinter off in 2010 to go and work on State of Decay before moving on to Motiga. And Motiga's got about $20 million in funding to create a new MOBA. Man, all these MOBAs still getting huge amounts of funding. It's like everybody is throwing tons of money at that. But Motiga, the studio behind Gigantic, this game is very much I don't know, I almost feel like not calling it a MOBA because it doesn't really have lanes and creep waves. It's much more of like an arena brawler with like third-person action similar to Smite, and these giant guardians, which honestly, when I looked at it, reminded me a lot of Minimum. You guys familiar with that game, Xanax? Have you heard of Minimum?
What?
Minimum?
No. Oh yeah, isn't that the one with like the Titans?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gigantic is like that, but with guardians. So you have like two guardians that fight each other. And the Guardians are, the best way I can describe them would be like, imagine a base in like League of Legends or Dota or something like that, but the base is mobile and like stomps around through the map and attacks the other base, and you have to sort of defend it and attack the other one and work together in that sort of format.
Oh.
So that's how it works, which, the game is pretty interesting. It's 2 teams of 5, you have your leveling up abilities, you have the ability to sort of augment your abilities as you level up. So like instead of just gaining additional damage, you get like an extra effect, kind of similar to Blizzard's MOBA,
Heroes of the Storm.
Heroes of the Storm.
Heroes of the Storm, where you can kind of choose like a passive trait that changes how the ability works. So it's somewhat like that. But really, I wanted to talk to you guys about this because there was some gameplay available from, I think, ZAM, the ZAM network, and yeah, Mike B.
Yeah.
And looking at the gameplay, it doesn't look like your typical MOBA. And I started to really think, a lot of people are going to judge this game because it's called a MOBA, and because it's got like the sort of like 5-man teams and this progression back and forth, this sort of like tug of war style moving across the map. And there are some minions, like there are these capturable points where you can spawn certain minions from these points, and they will sort of defend for you and sort of accrue over time this resource that's used to sort of summon your guardian across the battlefield. So there is like those objective-based gameplays, but I kind of started to think, at what point do we need to move away from calling these kind of games straight up MOBAs? Because it kind of just seemed like they're more arena brawlers now than anything. we're moving away from like the typical tri-lane waves and minions. I mean, there's still MOBAs like that, but this game is very vertical. There's a lot of jumping and sort of grappling around and going up high up and down low. And I don't know, guys, like, do you feel as though the genre, the name MOBA, really sort of denotes what kind of games we're starting to see from this genre now? Like, I kind of feel as though like people aren't moving their perception along with what the MOBA genre can be, as comparison to say the MMO genre or the RPG genre or the FPS genre, where you have sort of base elements which are the same, but everything else is completely different around that. What do you feel about the MOBA genre really just puts people off, essentially? What do you feel like when someone sees this, they're like, oh, it's a MOBA, I don't really want to play it? Do you feel as though there's like certain elements of MOBAs that just really make people not happy or not inclined to try it initially?
You make the comparison there to MMORPGs. I think that's kind of the same idea. It's like your base MMORPG that someone would think of as a fantasy game with an open world with raids and dungeons, whatever. Whereas, EVE Online is an MMORPG. We accept that, even though it doesn't really have a lot of that stuff. You could argue even that something like Minecraft or DayZ are almost like MMORPGs because they provide that. I think the point of it is, and you can get into all sorts of definitions or whatever, but it provides the same general experience. It's kind of how I tend to categorize things. Mm-hmm. You're going around, you're doing stuff in an open-ish world, maybe occasionally have an instant space and whatever, growing your character. That's an MMORPG, whether you're doing it, like so, whether it's Minecraft or World of Warcraft or EVE, that kind of is an MMORPG to me. Whereas a MOBA is, again, to me, this is sort of my notion of it. It's a closed arena with, I'd say, fixed teams. So it's like you're always going to have equal number. It's like it's always going to be 5-on-5 or 8-on-8 or 10-on-10 or whatever, as opposed to people jumping in and jumping out at all the times. Obviously, people can leave, but they're dicks. And you do have some kinds of objectives, I guess, which might be, on the line of a deathmatch or control points, or there might be minions and lanes and towers or whatever. But I think it's more, well, even deathmatch is kind of iffy because even that's less, I don't know, maybe a little less MOBA-ish. But if it has that kind of feel of having to queue for a thing and having those equal teams, then that to me is a MOBA. And it's not necessarily like a League of Legends or a Dota 2, that exact kind. I think you can work games like Gigantic in. You can work in the Zomba, Dead Island Epidemic. I even for a while was almost considering World of Tanks as a MOBA. It's kind of the same thing. You got your guys and you have an objective. You just don't have lanes and so on. So I think you can put a lot of stuff in that MOBA banner.
I think really that it's just the fact that an FPS, for example, is so defined as, you have a gun from a first-person perspective. But Arena Brawler, multiplayer online Arena Brawler, is so sort of broad, and we've talked about this before, that you really sort of get, you get the sort of run-of-the-mill, this is your basic MOBA, essentially. And then you have, like, the variants of that, but the variants of that are never really get the credit I think that they deserve sometimes because of the fact that people are so used to, like, the run-of-the-mill baseline MOBA, essentially. So I kind of started to think, like, should we get away from calling games like this MOBAs and call them, brawlers or arena brawlers? Is that a better sort of definition for these style of games and something that wouldn't necessarily cause players to be outright, furious or annoyed by its, presence in the gaming industry or the gaming market, essentially?
I myself, I have a few thoughts about this whole topic and everything. I think people are way too hung up on what something is considered as far as, like, the term that it's called. But if you're really going to start arguing about a MOBA, I think the issue lies within the fact that for a very extended amount of time, MOBA was looked at from two different video games, League of Legends and Dota, and then Dota 2. And I think that's the issue where people are starting to feel like if it's not like League of Legends, which is like Dota, and if it's not like either of those two games or even Dota 2, then it can't really be a MOBA. And I think that's flat out wrong because there are big differences between arena brawlers already exist. If you look at Get Amped 2, and even Lost Saga, they already exist out there, and that's just to name a few. And there are very, very big differences between those sort of games and like League of Legends, Smite, and even Gigantic. I feel like a MOBA is not a MOBA without minions. So if it starts to like do it now and not having minions, and it's strictly like player versus player, and it doesn't really have a lot of PVE elements to it either, then that's more so of an arena brawler. I just don't like when people are so caught up on it. I think Gigantic looks amazing. I don't care if it's third person. I actually prefer third person views because I feel like it gets me more into the action mood rather than playing League of Legends where I feel like I'm just controlling this avatar in the third person view. Like as far as like Smite does it or even Gigantic does it, it makes me feel like I am that guardian. I am that thing, and I am about to roll you over. And
So you mentioned PVE. Gigantic does have that PVE element through the
yeah.
minions and like the actual guardians itself. Do you think so that's like a staple you feel that needs to be in most MOBAs? Is there anything else that you can think of that sort of is definable as a MOBA? Is that like the whole objective of killing a base? Is that like really what makes a MOBA? Because we have something like Dead Island Epidemic, which that it wasn't really about killing a base as it was separate objectives, but it still had those minions that you had to sort of contend with. So I'm kind of curious if there's any other definable features that if those are in your game, then most likely you have a MOBA on your hands. Essentially.
I feel like as long as the game isn't strictly based around, like all the game modes aren't based around a team deathmatch sort of thing, then that's more so for MOBA. When you're starting to get into team deathmatch and where like the amount of kills that you get starts to really matter versus the actual objectives, then you're starting to enter the brawler aspect of a video game. If the main objective is to kill the base or to capture this point or to get these objectives or to kill these certain monsters on the screen, whereas the amount of times that you've died doesn't really count against you except for the fact that you're wasting a lot of time not being in the field, then that makes a lot more sense of it being more so from MOBA rather than it being a brawler. Because if you really think about brawlers, you're thinking about like Street Fighter or Lost Saga or Get Amped 2 or
I was thinking of like something like Forge, which was
Forge, exactly, Forge,
or even the recently called
Rage.
Archblade.
Archblade. And local, if anyone does free to play, they know about Lost Chaos Online or something like that.
Yeah, that was a MOBA. That had like lanes and like creatures, and it was more of like Smite. It was like kind of Smite before Smite, essentially.
Yeah, but the thing about that game was it was very, very team deathmatchy. So like again, like I don't see MOBAs as sort of like it has to either be similar to League of Legends view or League of Legends looks or Dota look. I think Smite, in my opinion, Smite is right now as far as release, Smite is the only MOBA I can really get into. I love that game. And as far as League of Legends and everything, and Gigantic looks amazing. Like it looks so beautiful. I love the art.
The art looks really nice. I like the whole Guardian aspect. That's like your base, and your base, it sort of brings your base out of, it brings it past like having to progress to one side of the map in order for you to like complete objectives, because the objective comes to you essentially.
Exactly, and it makes it more dynamic outcomes. Like, okay, now the base is over here, and so now not only do I have to, like, say you're already at the place where the base used to be or whatever, now you actually have to venture over to where the base is now, and then you have to worry about defending your base, and then there's all the other points on the field, and there's all the other bonuses on the field, and then how you're going to progress your character in that match. I feel like the more you add these different sort of dynamic elements, the better the MOBA becomes, because then you're not having games that can kind of have like this meta. Your games start to become like unique in of themselves.
So Jason, are you more inclined to try MOBAs like this where it's a little bit more open in terms of like your defined role? There's not lanes where you have to stick to your lane and, you know, level up in that lane for a certain amount of time. It's much more focused on the combat and the sort of like just completing objectives and going out. Is that something that would interest you more? Like, I know you've always been a staunch sort of like opposer to MOBAs, but I'm curious to see, you know, what this sort of strikes you as.
Yeah, this looks better to me than like the strict MOBA, the League of Legends type. Probably for that main reason, because I'm not the kind of guy who's like going to get into something and then just go and read up everything on the web and be like, oh, well, if I choose top lane, I have to choose this champion and make sure I have these skills or whatever. I prefer a game where I can roam around a little bit, try different things, and not feel like I have to stick to the one strategy that works. Or if I'm going to be a jungler, I have to take this kind of stuff. I like that there's more variety to it. That's why when we played, like Dead Island Extreme or Epidemic, it was the same kind of thing where we kind of had to run around to a lot of different places as opposed to following this exact strategy. And I think that might be part of what you were talking about when we started this, when you said, you know, why do people shy away from MOBAs? And I think part of it is that the notion that you have to have this strict, the way you play. You must follow the meta game. Otherwise, the other guys on your team are going to yell at you for being a noob and feeding and, you know, learn to play and all that stuff. Where I feel like having something like this, where you've got a lot more options, makes you feel a little more comfortable when you're going around. Gives you more of the ability to feel that you can try different things and not necessarily get criticized for being awful.
Yeah, you can venture away from the area that you're, you know, like if you ventured away from top lane in like League of Legends or Dota, people were like, why are you moving away from there, you know? But in this game, the objectives are all over the map, you know, and so there's no definable lanes. You can just kind of move wherever the action calls for it, essentially.
Right.
And I think that's something that we're really going to see a lot more MOBAs in the future do. We even see a lot of that through like Smite, through its extra game modes.
Or Dawngate.
Or Dawngate too, yeah, where you have those side. But even Dawngate has the lane that you sort of farm, and you still have items to build. I think we're going to see a lot more games to sort of focus on open world objectives, and open world within the arena, of course, but objectives that aren't just based around a particular area of a map, and you have to stay in that particular area for you to complete whatever role that you've set yourself up to be. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of Gigantic. It's currently in pre-alpha. I believe alpha is starting soon, and you'll be able to sign up for it now if you wish to do so. I'm going to go ahead and do that myself after this live stream, podcast rather. Yeah.
Not live stream.
Yeah, it is live, and it is being streamed between the three of us, but it is a podcast. There we go.
Sure.
Technicalities, semantics, you know. But why don't we go ahead then and move on to some D-bombs and A-bombs. We had a lot of good discussion there with the Eternal Crusade and then Gigantic. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what's been bugging us, or what's been making our jimmies rustled, what have you, you know? I'm
not telling you what rustles my jimmy.
Oh, man. Well, hopefully it's your girlfriend, because if not, she's in for a surprise if that's not what rustles your jimmies. But
Anyway.
I have a D-bomb then for Warframe, update 14 specifically. There's a lot of new content. They added some pretty cute little pets that you can get that you level up. It's actually, I gotta bring it up now because I forget the name of the pet, but it was called, here, I'm bringing it up right now. You can get the Kubro. The Kubro pet, which to me is like a platypus, because it's a mammal that's born from an egg. And platypuses are born from eggs.
So I hear Kubro, and I think it should be like a cobra who's your bro.
He's a Kubro. He's a cool bro.
Cool bro? Okay, there's
it's Kubro, but he's a cool bro. It's like a little dog, like alien dog thing.
It sounds like a Pokemon too.
Yeah. They added, yeah, that's true. Like, catch that Kubro. In fact, there's a Pokemon-esque element where you can take the genetic profile of your Kubro and you can mix it with other Kubros from other players, and you get like an augmented genetic profile. So you can have a Kubro that's like more specific with different stats.
Sure.
It's kind of cool. But yeah, they have that, and they added new PvP missions. And they added the ability for players to have their own personal spaceship and revamp the UI. So the game definitely making some pretty big strides since its original release, and I have to give it a bomb for it. I have not played the new update yet, but definitely going to download it after this because, man, it's looking pretty good. You know, Perfect World may be buying them, but until then, they've got some pretty awesome updates coming out for the game. So
They're going out swinging.
Yeah, kudos to Digital Extremes and Warframe. I really like how the game's progressing. Jason.
All right. I think I did this once before. I doubled up. I gave a dub bomb and an A bomb to the same thing. So I'm doing it again.
He's double scooped ice cream.
I'm giving a dub bomb to the Dota 2 International being on ESPN3. That was like really big news this week about how they were going to be on ESPN3 and even have like a half-hour profile show or something on ESPN2.
Yeah, it starts tonight at like 8:30.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, ESPN3 is like an app. It's not like a real network. So it's cool that you're getting into some of the mainstream, which is great. It's good that we hear Dota and ESPN, we're thinking, oh my God, that's going to be amazing. But kind of gotta hold your jimmies, so to speak. That's sort of my A-bomb to it. Is people are really reacting to it, thinking this is the next huge step, which it might be. But until they can get something better, it's basically, like I said, it's a streaming app. ESPN3 is, which basically means it's not much better than being on Twitch, which already gets plenty of views and whatever for.
I didn't really get that. Like, why would you watch it on ESPN3 if you could just watch it on Twitch or in the Dota client?
For people, it's for people who don't already have it. People who
and it's also for people that actually watch ESPN3. Like the World Cup just ended. Like a lot of people have the ESPN3 app now because of the World Cup. So I don't think it's something too bad.
You don't think it's redundant?
I'm not saying it. I don't think it's redundant. I just don't think it's necessarily that huge step that people are like, oh, this is definitely going to be the thing now. Because I could remember watching a Magic the Gathering event on ESPN2 back in like 1997. I remember that was on there, and people made a huge deal out of that in the trading card game world. And what has it led to? Do you watch Magic every Sunday instead of football? No, you don't. So, I mean, it might be something, but I'm going to kind of hold my enthusiasm until it gets to be a little more mainstream.
As a counterpoint, Magic is not as interesting to watch.
Sure.
From a competitive standpoint.
And did Magic ever get into the Sables Arena? I think not.
No, you didn't see two players facing off with like 10,000 people watching the game. Yeah, that would have been pretty crazy. They'd be like, oh, he put down a land, everybody cheer. What's a play that someone could do in Magic that people would like freak out upon? I don't even know.
I don't know. I don't play Magic.
Yeah, Jason would be able to tell us, but I'm sure that would take a while.
I haven't played for a while.
All right. And Xanax, what's you're into bomb A-bomb, man?
Okay, so I am doing something similar to Jason. I am giving a dub bomb and an A-bomb to Dragon Slayer, which is X Legends' next MMORPG after they released Our Kingdom earlier this year. So the game's trailers and everything are looking really, really cool and everything. But I'm starting to sum up X Legend to be sort of like the free-to-play version of just kind of like Call of Duty. You just kind of reskin the same game over and over again and give us a new feature or two, and then you just sell it to us. And I complained about the same exact thing with Our Kingdom, and I got sucked in so much, and I like that game so much. And so now I'm complaining about Dragon Slayer, but I already know in a few months I'm just going to be playing it and covering it. And so, damn you, X Legend. Damn you.
I'm just surprised that they can make so many MMOs. Like,
yeah, but when you reskin it,
quality is the issue.
Well, actually, I have to say, as far as anime MMORPGs go, they are the creme de la creme. I will honestly say that, but that's not saying much when there's like only Dragon Nest and a few others out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's not really any new anime MMORPGs coming out besides what they're putting out. But honestly, like their anime games the anime MMOs are really good, but it's just kind of like a reskin of a reskin of a reskin. Like if you've played Eden Eternal, Grand Fantasia, Katsu Saga, Spirit Tales, Our Kingdom, and then you look at Dragon Slayer, you're gonna see like Dragon Slayer is pretty much a mashup of one element from each of those games now, and now it's starting to really look like, yo, come out with something new, come out with something interesting. But I'm still gonna play the game because it looks cool. I don't know what it is. It frustrates me, and makes me happy.
You forgot about Ragnarok Online too.
But they didn't
Everybody
do that.
forgets about it, Ragnarok. I know you're saying like recent.
Oh,
anime.
recent. Please.
It's okay. Everybody forgets about Ragnarok.
That, yeah, that game does not even exist.
What
I
about
wish
Scarlet Blade?
Scarlet Blade.
That's not anime. That's
no, ew.
anime.
That's ew. That's like 2002, met 2008. Like
That was like last year, or maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, you mean that Queen's Blade?
The area
thing.
game.
Yeah.
Area.
It's another area game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel as though like, how do you take an anime game and make it really in depth and different from what's currently out there? I feel it's almost like X Legend needs to like stop making anime games for a little bit so that they can try new things and then come back to it. But it seemed like they have like a formula going that nets them pretty good money. Yeah,
it
Must
worked.
work,
It makes
because
them
as Xanax said, I'm still going to
money.
play it anyway. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm still probably gonna sink money into it anyway. So
when I was in the early beta, there was tons of people. There was an I haven't seen. I saw more people in the starting areas of that game than I saw when I played WildStar. You know, and that's a AAA with a huge amount of budget of advertising and stuff like that. And in the starting areas, way more players in Aura Kingdom.
I mean, I don't know. I seriously do not know what it is because I've been complaining about X Legend since Spirit Tales. I enjoyed Eden Eternal and Grand Fantasia, and I hated Katsu Saga, but I started complaining about them. But ever since I started complaining, it's like rinse and repeat. Like they keep suckering me in. So I'm gonna play it, and I'm probably gonna enjoy it, but I'm gonna.
You're like, I'm gonna eat this, but you're not gonna make me like it.
Yeah.
I'll eat it. It's the only thing here.
It's funny though that we were talking about Warhammer earlier today. Is that one of the things I used to hear is that a property has like 18 months. What you do if you're one of these kind of companies is you make the same thing, and then after 18 months, that's when people stop being interested in it, and you make the next thing and get everyone to buy in on that. Warhammer, Games Workshop kind of does that with Warhammer, releasing new editions every little less frequent, like every 5 years or whatever. And they do the same thing. They get everyone to buy in again on the new stuff, buy all the new miniatures, new rule books, and they just repeat it over and over. They've been doing that for like 30 years. So this sounds like kind of the same thing.
It really kind of is. And I mean, the new, like I saw a gameplay trailer today and the official trailer, like the CGI trailer, and I was like, this looks so cool. But I'm still mad at them because I'm just like,
CGI trailers never. Have you seen the Maple Story 2 CGI trailer?
Oh
like,
god,
that was like cinematic as crazy.
Oh, yeah.
All
But
right.
the gameplay trailer is awesome too. Like the Minecraft block soul stuff.
But it looks completely different than the actual CGI trailer.
Yeah.
Even though it looks cool, it looks completely different. So.
Yeah, funny thing is too, Dragon Slayer is actually already in alpha in Taiwan. So they're actually going to release that game in North America before the end of this year. Which Our Kingdom came out and like officially launched in January of this year. So, and they also mentioned at the beginning of this year that there's actually supposed to be a third client MMORPG coming out this year as well. So I don't know how they're going to fit that in. But there's supposed to be 3 that release this year.
They must be a pretty big studio.
Oh, they have like over 250 people. I think they have like 200 people dedicated to Our Kingdom itself.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it's not small by any means, but they still make me so angry. It's like having a woman. Like you can't live without them, but you also can't live with them.
I'm not touching that.
Xanax looks at his anime MMOs like women. There you have it.
Scratch that.
All right. Well, we've got a member highlight here from Nintendo. He was our sole member highlight for this week, and he had his own A-bomb to give. He says an A-bomb goes to Red 5. They were working ages on the game Firefall and changed it so much that they angered the community, especially now shortly before the release of the game. They offer the founder packs and early access packs, which range from $29.99 to $99.99. Which, to be honest, $99.99 comparatively to some access packs is pretty low now. Yeah. But he says, I was a closed and open beta tester, and even those are restricted from entering the game right now since we didn't pay for the early access. Well, that kind of sucks.
Wrong. No, that's wrong.
That's wrong? You can't get it?
No, I was playing it like half an hour before I started recording this, so yeah, he's wrong. You can actually play it.
You can play it Nintendo. It looks like you just need to log in right now. If
Early
that-
access stuff probably gives you like more loot or bonuses or whatever, I suppose.
You actually get a pet, and you get a pet and a title for being a closed and open beta tester.
Oh, there you go. He said, if that's the way the industry handles games from now on, then I see a pretty dark future for MMOs. The problem is that people will still buy it even for that price. And I have to agree to Jason's opinion about early access. In some ways, it's good to get early access, but only if you really care about the game and actually report bugs and the likes. But people rarely do that. They just want to play the game and don't really care about anything else.
Mhm.
That's true. There's a lot of people who just play it. Early access isn't for fixing bugs for them. It's for trying
Yeah.
out the features and figuring out if they want to spend more time in the game or burning
Yeah.
themselves out early before the game even launches. So
There's a-
Yeah.
So Nintendo, there has been some big changes. The patch just went live a couple days ago for launch, and there's actually a huge write-up about it on MMO Bomb. So I would definitely say go check that out if you haven't already. You can get in the game, and maybe your A bomb will change to a dub bomb next week for Red 5. Huh? Maybe?
I don't
Huh?
think it will.
You don't think it will?
No.
Xanax is
'cause-
spoiling things over here.
Sorry. I
Undermining
played it,
me.
so I'm just saying.
We'll talk about that after the new launch goes live. We'll talk about the differences and all that. But until then, Nintendo, check it out for yourself. Let us know. All right, guys. So the question of the week last week was, how do you handle frustrating moments in gaming? And would you consider yourself toxic at times? Jason, do you mind taking the first response here?
Absolutely. It's from my boy From Hell. He hangs out in my streams all the time, so can give him props. All right, From Hell says, I wouldn't say I rage quit, but I'll usually just stop playing when I realize I'm just not enjoying the game. I know from previous experiences that when, for whatever reason, I'm no longer having fun playing, the smallest things will piss me off and I'll go off on people. Sometimes they have it coming, but even then I just report them, take screenshots or whatever, and log off, rather than making things bigger than they need to be. I agree with him to the point of yelling at people. Like I will be at the point where I'm having a bad day playing something, and then just one thing happens. Like, I die like twice in a row, and I'm just like, screw this, F bleep, whatever. I'm logging out, and I just something like that happens. So I definitely agree with that, but I don't get nasty. I only yell at myself and at my monitor. And actually, okay, I did that. I might actually yell at that SOB who killed me all those times, but I won't say it like over live chat or anything.
You were voicing your displeasure and unturned,
I
dying.
have my inner monologue. Oh yeah. Well, that was
We all were dying there all those times, like that kind of stuff.
that BB's SOB.
BB, it was baby,
BB.
it was baby.
Baby. All right.
All right, so we got a comment here from Pretzel Bear. I like the name. Always a fan of getting a comment from a bear man out of pretzel. He says, "Oh dear, my rage meter explodes sometimes, but not because of my team playing bad. I get angry when people spout nonsense and target people, especially when they're in the wrong and are complete tosspots. I cope with it by usually ignoring chats in game and not going to forums because I don't want to feel upset and leave a negative feeling in the game or thread." Now this is the kind of guy that I can get behind.
That was exactly what I was
High
going to say to him.
five.
I was like, he sees people spouting nonsense, and I'm thinking, dude, your first problem is you're reading chat.
You gotta like just turn that stuff off. Just not pay attention to that. There's a lot of people just their whole game is just to make you feel bad about playing essentially. But Pretzel Bear, I can't imagine what would a Pretzel Bear's rage meter explode? What would a raged out Pretzel Bear look like? Like I don't even what is
Salty.
salty.
He's getting a little salty. Yeah, there you
He's
go.
completely salty. He's got a lot of salt in him. So yeah, I think Pretzel Bear has got a pretty good coping mechanism. Just not just pushing it away, just not looking at it. It's a good way to react about that. Xanax, will you take the next comment here?
Okay. So this guy's name is Crazy Nika with 2 Ks. He says, when I feel like I'm about to get toxic in a game, I turn off my mic and scream and swear at the person who is screwing up my game until I'm satisfied. Then I turn on my mic and try my best to cooperate with them.
That's excellent.
That's a nice
that is
two-face
that
right
is
there.
awesome.
Well, I think that's like one of the best ways. Just like, oh, you oh, Good job. I'm so happy to have you. You know, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, it's kind of like writing that note, that email to your boss, and then pressing delete at the last second.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you don't press send.
I will admit, I had a toxic moment earlier today. I was playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and there was a new player in the game. I know I wasn't trying to be upsetting about the new player, but oh my god, he didn't know how to open doors or throw grenades. And in Counter-Strike, that's a big thing. Like, that's important to know. But I was like, oh, I actually voted to try to kick him out of the game so that it would try to improve the experience for everybody. I know it was a bad thing for me to do, but it didn't work. He didn't get kicked out, and you know what? He actually ended up defusing the bomb at the last round.
Well, you see what it was then. It's like when you have a movie and there's like these 6 army guys who have to escort this specialist, this geeky scientist type who doesn't know what end of a gun to hold.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it was. You guys were escorting the scientist dude, and he's the only one who knew how to defuse the bomb.
He was the only one there at the end that defused the bomb, and I was so proud of him. I told him good job in the chat. I was like, oh, he's done it. He's done it. So I forget your name, whoever you were. You made up for yourself. I think he spent like 30 seconds at a door at one point. I was watching him. I was like, oh, God. Just
scientists have trouble with that too.
Yeah.
Doors.
Jason, actually, I'll take the last one here from Shassel33. He says, on online games, I usually start calling people hackers and sometimes start flaming people when I get frustrated. Yes, I'm one of those kind of people. However, I find this really helps me as it allows me to release my frustration. I usually see myself performing better in the game after doing so, although that's probably because everyone else gets distracted by reading my text. I sometimes do it just for fun too, even when I'm not mad, because I find it pretty funny sometimes. For offline games, I just rage quit and start playing the game again 5 minutes later.
Yeah, it's interesting. He says he performs better because he thinks everyone else is distracted by reading his text. I wonder if he's sending it to global, like to both teams. That would be the best. Because then you just type all sorts of awful stuff in chat, and the other team is going to be so amused and distracted by it, you guys get to win.
Or maybe he just makes them feel so bad about themselves that they start performing worse, and then he just looks better.
Maybe.
That's the cynical side of it.
If you and I play together, next time we play together, I'm going to start just ripping you a new one in the global chat. See if that distracts the other.
Okay, do that. We'll see. We'll do a little experiment.
And you get back at me, say things about my mother and whatever. You know, there you go.
About you being old and a stallion and
well,
whatever.
no, you gotta lie about stuff.
Oh, okay. I can't tell the truth. You can't actually go with facts. Come on. No. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for sending in your comments there from the question of the week. This week's question of the week is, what's your opinion on Behavior Interactive's approach to free-to-play with Warhammer Eternal Crusade? Do you think there should be more MMOs with factions balanced in a similar way? So you think faction balancing through population size and through sort of like having more of one particular faction means that they fight as a group versus singular people in other factions, fighting stronger but solo. What do you guys think about that way of balancing that out? And do you think that works in a free-to-play environment? Let us know in the comments below. You can also send us an email at michael@mmobomb.com with your answers. Or you can tweet us at mmobomb on Twitter your response as well. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to your comment responses. Jason, how do people get a hold of you, man?
Well, WOG. Anyway,
WOG.
You can WOG me at my Twitter, just at WinterInformal. You can check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/JasonWinter, and blogging at jasonwinter.wordpress.com.
We should make WOG the new mounted.
What about High Five? That totally didn't catch on, by the way.
No, it didn't. Nobody even made a comment about it.
Yeah,
nobody even cared, ZX. No one cared. But WOG may be a little bit more unique than a High Five,
Free to WOG.
Free to WOG. Xanax, how do people get a hold of you, man?
You can reach me on YouTube and see all the best free-to-play coverage ever in the history of ever at youtube.com/XaenixTV. XAENEX-TV.
If you keep saying that, I'm not going to have you back here on the podcast. This is the MMO Bomb podcast.
Because clearly we're better.
Clearly, we have the best free-to-play coverage in the entire.
Let's agree to disagree. No, I'm joking.
Well, maybe,
you guys are awesome.
We'll have to. Maybe we'll have to have you on the actual YouTube. Do some coverage with us sometimes. Do a little collaboration.
Definitely.
All right. All right, guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of the Free to Play Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here. It was a great episode, lots of good information shared with everybody, and I appreciate, as always, all your personal comments. I read every single one of them. I do, every single one, and I love every single one of you guys who ends up showing up for the podcast. So kudos to you guys. Hope to see you guys next week on the show. But until then, we'll check you guys later. Spunkify out. Later, guys.